Good morning. On behalf of our team at RDIC, we'd like to welcome John Schachtel. He's here this morning to discuss the type of work he's done, the training he's received, characteristics they're looking for in the candidates, career opportunities, salary expectations, and working conditions. Just a reminder before we begin that after you watch this presentation, please complete the survey found on our website, either by using the QR code or going to our www.rdic.ca. By completing the survey, you're automatically entered to win a $50 gift card, which will be drawn at the end of every month. Thanks again to John for this informative presentation to help students in their quest to make a better choice about their future employment opportunities. Take it away, John.
Thanks, Doug. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, I'm John Schachtel. I'm a funeral director, and I am the president of the Saskatchewan Funeral Service Association, which represents approximately 400 licensees throughout Saskatchewan. These people are licensees and they pay an annual amount to be licensed in the Saskatchewan funeral profession. These licensees are such things as embalmers, funeral directors, salespeople, and transfer attendants. They all have to be licensed within our association. Embalmers, in case you don't know who they are the people who take a 2-year course, and in that course, we learn how to embalm a body. Embalming is using chemicals through the right common carotid artery, which is right here where you feel your pulse. We inject a solution into the deceased individual, and we inject that solution to preserve the body. Why do we preserve the body? It's because families usually aren't all around when the death happens, and they're flying in from various spots of Canada and the world, and they want to view their mom or dad or grandpa or grandma, or sister or brother, whomever, and before they are buried or cremated. That's the purpose of preserving the body. There is less and less embalming nowadays than there was 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. Cremation is very big now, and viewings are becoming less and less. Identification is a process that needs to be done within our profession to make sure we have the individual before they are cremated. So the purpose of embalming is to preserve, sanitize, and to restore the body to its lifelike features. And it gives comfort to families. Anyways, that's an embalmer. Funeral directors are ones that are licensed to meet with the family, sit down, make all the necessary arrangements, complete all the necessary paperwork and documents that are regulated by our association, and then submitting the application to get a death certificate from eHealth in Regina. It's all the work. There's about 60 to 80 people hours, man or woman hours, into every funeral, right from the time of death until we're done at the graveside. That's what funeral directors are. And you can be a funeral director and an embalmer in this profession. And you also can be a salesperson. That's what I am. I'm called a EFDS, which means embalmer, funeral director, and salesperson. A salesperson is one who is licensed to go and talk to families regarding their pre-arrangements. Many families, especially our grandpa and grandma and our moms and dads ages, they talk about getting their affairs in place, so they don't want to leave it to the kids. That's the purpose for someone coming in and wanting to prepay, and someone such as a licensed salesperson comes in and deals with these individuals. You have to be licensed in that area. And the transfer people, well, those people are licensed to work at a transfer service. So that means that not the individual who picks up the deceased individual, but the company that has a transfer service has to be licensed. Anyways, many young people are choosing to get started in the profession doing that and getting used to the deceased individuals. I recommend whatever path you choose. I believe the funeral profession is one of the most rewarding, most hardworking careers you could choose. If you love people, you will love this career. Anyways, we're going to get to the schooling now. The first step is to try to see if you can get a job at a funeral home in your area. And that's probably if you're going to school, you can work part-time after school, or you can work on weekends and evenings. Try to see if you can get a job there part-time. It might be cutting the grass. It might be pushing snow. It might be washing cars. Do whatever you can. It might be vacuuming. It might be cleaning toilets. Sometimes you have to do those terrible jobs and they're not very nice, but you are exposed to the funeral home. And once they get to know you and trust you, this is the managers or owners, they will bring you on possibly into more hours and more time and more exposure to the industry. So even if they say, oh, things are tight, we can't afford paying you, then I suggest volunteering. Volunteering is very common. And then you get a 2-week every day after school where you can go to the funeral home and you can be there for an hour and a half and get some good insight what's all happening. This career or this vocation or this career in the funeral business is a good one. We have a shortage right now within our profession of licensees. That's people that are licensed as funeral directors and embalmers, and not so much salespeople and not so much transfer services, but it's mostly funeral directors and embalmers right across Canada. So why? Is because young people are finding that this isn't a profession they wish to choose. Many get excited about it, but it's not for everybody. And guess what? A death just doesn't happen from 9 to 5. It happens through the night, wee hours of the morning, at various times, and it affects everyone in the profession. So what are funeral home managers looking for in students? First thing is, are you teachable? Are you willing to learn the profession? That is huge. Number 2, are you willing to put in the extra hours, including evenings and weekends? Number 3, do you like older people? Can you relate to them, such as like your grandparents and parents and some of their friends? If you do, that is huge. Number 4, do you have energy, passion, and the ability to think ahead or on your feet approach? What does that mean? So that when you're doing a job and you're doing it to your best of your ability, that you're thinking, okay, what's my next thing I have to do after? And so you have a system in place that makes you think always, what is next? What is next? And that impresses any funeral home manager, that you can think on your own and you're told things once. If you're told twice, that's okay. But once the third time, they'll say, you're not getting this. So paying attention and try to understand. That is so huge. The other thing, number 5, is do you have patience and understanding? Remember, when the death happens, the bereaved or the family that have lost their loved one are not themselves. And we all need to be gentle and kind in our guidance and help with them. Number 6, do you want to be a professional that is respected in your community? So when we're done at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or whenever we're done work, we have to portray that personal life image when you go to the grocery store or you're out with people or you're talking to the neighbors. You always have to be nice. If you want to go and get rowdy and you want to go let your hair down, well, then go out of town, go to the lake and go be somewhere else, go out of province, go have fun. I know we all need that to let our hair down. But in the community you work, you have to portray that image at the funeral home. And number 7, appearance. Appearance, I can't say enough about it, is important. Yes, clothes help, but more importantly, you have to look neat with your hair. Your eyes have to be bright and shiny. Sometimes that's hard in the mornings and getting to work. And then your smile. if you have a smile, it makes everybody feel comfortable. And it makes you, it doesn't cost much to smile. It takes more energy to frown. And so smiling is a sign of you being happy in the moment. And also your posture. If you sit back and you have your shoulders back in your posture, it's also important. Um, you know, having your shoulders back and your chest out, it just makes you look in a nice, friendly manner, makes you look professional. So we were taught that in the profession. So it's very important to walk straight, shoulders back, smile on, eyes open, and a nice demeanor. And do your best as communicating with others. And remember, everybody that you meet in the profession is somewhat sad. So sometimes you can tease or you can make little comments about yourself or about this or that or the next thing. But people always talk about is the first thing is the weather. How is the weather? Weather is cold, weather is sunny, or they talk about COVID. Some people are not in good frame of minds lately with COVID. So you have to deal with people's frustration of isolation and what COVID has done to the whole family. So that's what we're experiencing in the funeral homes, just like many other businesses. They're feeling the pressure, especially when a loved one dies, there's the added pressure. Number 8, try to remember the golden rule. Always treat everybody, everyone, the way you want to be treated. It's with respect. So, and if you don't understand what I'm talking about, the golden rule, talk to your parents or your grandparents or your teachers or your supervisors, whomever it may be, about all these 8 different things. So I'm going to talk about schooling now. There's 2 schools that we recommend, mortuary school. First thing is that I recommend you see if you can get a job at a funeral home. That is huge. Next thing is that the funeral home will suggest you go to school. And I'd suggest you at least have a good 6 months to a year volunteering or working at that funeral home before you get a real good understanding. The one thing about our funeral profession is that every day is different. You're going to deal with different families, different dynamics, different scenarios, different emotions. Some are up, some are down. Not every family is the same. Not every body is the same. Not every funeral is the same. Excuse me. So that's what's unique about our job. You will never get bored. So mortuary schools, there's 2. There's one in Calgary. It's called Mount Royal. And you do all your schooling online. And also Canadian Funeral College. And that's also online. So mortuary schooling is a highly committed position in your life. So once you commit to that, it's commitment for 2 years. Going to school costs between $8,000 to $10,000 over the 2 years, not including accommodations, not including gas travel, not including your internet and all that. Those are all above that. But schooling, typically $8,000 to $10,000. It could have gone up through COVID, maybe it hasn't, but this is in the last year or so. It's a daily commitment as you FaceTime with the teachers in the evening, as you work at the funeral home during the day, and in the evening, you go online and use Zoom and you FaceTime with your teachers. And each evening you have an assignment that can take up 2 to 4 hours with these online classes. Tests are every term, and there's 4 terms per year. So that means every 3 months you have an exam. Tests are proctor online. The classes consist of business, biology, anatomy, chemistry, microbiology, embalming, funeral directing, 1, 2, and 3. There's 3 classes. And you have a choice here. Remember we talked about, you don't have to be If you want to just be a funeral director, that means you just deal with families. You don't have to deal with the deceased individuals by preparing their bodies. And that's your license to arrange and direct the service and or the memorial service with the burial in the cemetery. I would recommend that you take funeral directing and embalming, because if you want a full-time career, I think, or if you want to be a manager of a funeral home, or you want to own your own funeral home, it's best that you're licensed in all areas. I can't say enough about, I have all licenses, and sometimes when you have a lot of funeral director, you're dealing with families. Sometimes it's nice to go to the back room and just have quiet with the deceased. Does that make sense? Like, to get away from people, just have the quiet. So I like both sides. So, and also it's very rewarding, the embalming part. When you can make someone look very peaceful, very at ease, and the best the family I've seen in years, and make them look younger too. So I'd recommend both embalming and funeral directing. I lost my spot here. Also, if you're an embalmer, you have practical exams as an embalmer student, and you have these right at the funeral home where you're working at. And also, when you're working at the funeral home, you're going to be working with an embalmer who is above you and has trained and is licensed. So they will give you these tools and teach you embalming practical as you move along. So as a funeral student, as a funeral director, you have to sit down and be in on 50 funeral arrangements. That means 50 sessions, first by observing and working with the funeral director. You won't have to go and make these arrangements in those 50. You will be watching, observing, learning the language, how the funeral director answers the questions, and pretty well comforts and guides each and every family. And so you may have 2 or 3 at your location of funeral home. So you get to choose a style that works for you to get the job accomplished. Everybody is so different in that approach. And you would need at least 120 hours working at the funeral home. As well as an embalmer student, you need to observe and witness and partake in 30 embalmings. So if your plans are to, I talked about that, sorry. As I said previously, funeral home is a very rewarding business, and I can't say enough why we need young people in this profession, young people that really care about other people. I'm going to tell you my story and show you my passion and my desire and attention to detail that gave me a successful career. I was born in Regina, Saskatchewan. I was born the 10th child out of 11 in a Catholic family. I was raised on a farm about an hour north of Regina. I didn't care too much for the farm life. But as I got older now in my life, I enjoy the countryside. I enjoy the trees and the land and animals, and I enjoy little things in life, the open space. When I was younger, I didn't care for that so much. My parents and my 3 youngest siblings, we all moved to Humboldt, which was about 90 minutes away from our farm. And we moved to Humboldt in 1976. I was 14, 15 years old. I loved this new way of life, and I love being the new kid in town. It didn't take long for me to meet a friend, and her dad worked at the funeral home. And it was the summer of, it was June of 1977 that she asked me if I would come and paint funeral homes in Bruno, a small town out of Humboldt, and Leroy. They had little chapels, the funeral home did. So because I was at the farm and I knew all about looking after the farm, cutting grass and maintaining building shingles and painting and doing the trim and all that stuff, making the yard look nice. I knew lots about painting. So this was in June of 77, and that was the beginning of me being exposed to the funeral profession. I was really scared because I was saying, well, I'm painting this funeral home. I'm saying, I wonder if there's any dead bodies inside. So I was curious, but I was also afraid because I was not exposed to death. So that finished me off, and the funeral director in Humboldt saw, man, this young boy can really paint. Like, it didn't take me long, and it didn't take me long to get the building done, and I helped the family out, and they were impressed with how well it turned out. And even at that age, came back from my job, and my mom had these coveralls on, which I used for painting, and in my pockets were some pantyhose. And my mom said, "What are you doing with those pantyhose?" And I said, "Well, Mom, that was for straining the paint." Well, she had a funny look on her face because she knew I was with a gal that I was painting. So anyways, that's a little funny story, but you remember all this stuff, and there's nothing more important is remembering the beginning of how you all got started. And that's what I'm sharing with. So when you think of June of 1977, that's 44 years ago, and how the time has flown. And that fall, in 1977, they asked me to come work at the funeral home. And I was the guy that cut grass. I was the guy that put up the Christmas lights. I was the guy that delivered water softener salt. I was the guy that shoveled the driveway in the winter. I was the maintenance guy. They liked me. They knew I could trust me. So I'm telling you this just so you know that you have to get your foot in. I got my foot in by just showing them I could paint, I can cut the grass, I'm responsible. So I wanted you to hear that so that you know that whatever way you can get into a funeral home, you have to get the funeral director to like you and trust you that you're going to do a good job. So I remember this one time, I was a Friday night after school. I had to go and pick up a body at the airport. And of course, at the airport, you have to go to the cargo area of the airport. And I had this 1972 station wagon, and they were pretty simple back in those days. So I had to go and pick up this body, put it in the back, and then I drove home. And it was probably nighttime or dusk, or anyways, on certain parts of the road, I turned off. I had to turn right, so I had to pull over into that lane. And of course, there was some gravel, and I kicked up. And of course, I didn't have the radio on or anything. And those stones hit those wheel wells. Well, my gosh, I thought I was going to jump out of my seat. So even I, in the beginning, was afraid of death. I was afraid. And I used to have nightmares that I was trapped in a morgue with a whole bunch of bodies. And so there's an adjustment time where you had this, your mind and your subconscious plays some tricks on you that, oh, the dead. There's nothing to worry about the dead. The dead are not going to hurt you, or it's just all in our minds, what we all think about. The ones you have to watch are the living. You don't have to worry about the dead. The dead have never come back to life for me in my whole career. You always hear stories, oh, did someone wake up on your table one day, or so on and so forth. Never happened. So that's all hearsay. So also when I was a young little lad, I had to go out with another gentleman and go up to a small little town. And this old 90-year-old guy, there he was. He passed away, and I had to go pick up his body with this other attendant. So first time I've seen a dead body or touched one, and he was still warm yet because he passed probably an hour or two before. So we brought the stretcher in. That's the little thing with wheels you see on TV all the time, and they're always transporting bodies or whether they're dead or alive. So we brought the stretcher and put it beside the couch. And this guy was tall. Oh my gosh, he was tall. But he wasn't overweight, but he was just a big man. So I was at one end, the other fellow was at the head end. So we kind of in unison pulled. Well, he was so heavy, I just fell right on top of him. The dead weight. Oh my gosh, I was just overwhelmed with how someone could be that heavy. So that's one little story that I wanted to share with you. Also back in the 70s and 80s, death wasn't talked about. Nobody brought up the subject. It was never talked at the dinner table. It was never talked about at coffee. People would say, oh, Joe Smith died, or Hank Williams, or whomever has passed away, and there would always be remorse, but no one ever talked about death. And it was peculiar because me as a young fella getting into the profession and working part-time, it was kind of odd, and people thought it was weird that I would work at a funeral home. And even the girls had a hard time saying, you touch dead bodies, and I'd get teased, and later on in life they'd even call me Dead John. So I was bugged and teased. How's business, dead? People teased, and I didn't mind it. I enjoyed humor, and humor is so good for being in this profession, because that's one thing that helps is humor and joking around and playing jokes and pranks on people, because we're always dealing with doom and gloom in the funeral home. Anyways, I finished high school in 1979 in Humboldt. In February of 1980, I began my career in the funeral home in Humboldt. In March of that year, I was registered to school for a 2-year apprenticeship course with the Education Committee and the University of Saskatchewan. Back in those days, they had apprenticeship courses, which I feel were the way that the professions should go back to, because you had to be employed at the funeral home, you had to do apprentice, you had to put so many hours in, and you'd go to school twice a year, 3 times a year, and they would give you in classroom information and teach you all about the various subjects, which I will talk about. Our classes consisted of, first of all these students were from across Saskatchewan. I think there was 6 in our class, and year ahead of us there was 8. So there weren't many in the profession back then. So anyways, the classes that we would take are anatomy, microbiology, sanitation, public relations, embalming, and business classes. And then I would go to school, and then I would come back to the funeral home, and I'd have about a month to study for my exams, and then I'd write them right in front of my boss. I had a hard time with these because I had a hard time concentrating. Back just talking about wages, back when I started in 1977, I was making $3 an hour. When I was hired on, I was making $4 an hour. And then as for every term or every year, I would get a raise. So every time I'd complete an exam and I passed, I would get a raise. So I was making $7 an hour in Humboldt, and I was in my 4th term. I was in the last term of September of 81 when a funeral director called me from Foam Lake and said that he lost one of his employees in a car accident, and his brother is dying of cancer. I need help. And he had a big location there. They did 250 calls a year. Humboldt was doing probably 150 calls. So this was a big location. So he asked if I would come, and I said, well, and he told me, right, I'll pay you $10 an hour. Well, it's $3 an hour more. So, and the reason that this funeral director from Foam Lake called is because he heard I was a good worker. I had a good reputation in town of being hardworking. And so it made my boss in Humboldt very upset that I left him. But I always say that, yes, if you're working hard and you're doing a good job, the funeral home should reward you. And that is with pay and respect you in that capacity. So I stayed with that funeral home in Foam Lake until, well, I graduated, first of all, in January of '82, and I received my license that year. And it's a diploma. And the funeral home in Foam Lake, there really wasn't room for me. It was a privately owned company, and of course the brother did pass away, and they did get back on their feet, but one of the sons was coming through the ranks, and there wasn't room for me there long term. So I decided that I want to go look somewhere else. So I moved to Prince Albert in 1983, and he paid me $12 an hour. So I was making more money as I was going along. And as when I got to Prince Albert, I noticed that it was busier and there was more work to do. And I liked the way my boss treated me. And I liked the way my boss was attention to detail. The last two places, yes, they were good, but this boss was fussy. He wanted to expect a lot out of his staff. So that's when I grew as a funeral director. And I'm telling you all this just because I did well in my profession and I got the exposure to it because I worked hard. That's really what it was. And I was good at it. I related to people well. And I even used a bit of my voice in singing, and that singing has helped me to become the singing funeral director or helping families when they're saying goodbye. And it's been such a great career, and I can't say enough about it. So I'm going to talk now, free cuff. I'm not going to look at my notes. I'm going to talk about the profession. So after 1985, I moved to Spiritwood. I was out there. I had to build a funeral home out there in this small little rural town. And I went to this little town for the challenge. And I found it very difficult living in a small town after Prince Albert. But I made the best of it. And my boss saw that I made a sacrifice for him. So he asked if I would join in on his ownership group. I was a young age. I was 23, no, pardon me. I was 25, 26 years of age. And he asked if I wanted to be a partner. Well, a young kid who wouldn't want to be a partner. So I became involved in this partnership when we started buying funeral homes. I wasn't involved. I was just a small little shareholder. But this owner, this manager that brought me on knew that I was a hard worker. So I decided I wanted to be out of small town. So I moved to Saskatoon in 1988, and I managed we were part of a corporation, this big conglomerate, and ourselves as a partnership formed, and Prairie Funeral Services. And we started in 1987, and I worked with that company until we were bought out in 1991. I was running a large new building in Saskatoon and trying to get business. It was a beautiful facility, nice white pillars on the outside, brick front, high ceilings, everything was nicely done. And my job was to bring new business to that funeral home. It was very difficult. Back in the 1980s and 90s, families were very committed and to the funeral home that's looked after them for 3-4 generations. So it was hard for me to get the new business. And I stayed at that funeral home owned by the new corporation, and I stayed on till 2002. At that time, they thought that a new manager should come in. Oh, first of all, I was making probably at that time as a manager, $75,000 a year. And I was averaging 180 calls a year. They felt that they should have a new manager in here, a manager that could maybe get the calls up, because that's really when you're hired on, how much business can you bring in? So I was told that they're going to bring a new manager in. And I was upset because I had 14 years at this funeral home, and they decided that they were going to let me go or transfer me somewhere else. And I says, you can't. I haven't done anything wrong. You can't transfer me. You can't take me out of management. Well, what they did is they terminated me. They terminated me in February of 2002. Okay. And they brought this other funeral director in. They were of Ukrainian descent. So they thought if they brought him in, that would bring the Ukrainian business up. So they gave me 9 months of severance, and I was off, and I was doing little odd jobs. And this was in the summer of 2002. But I said, oh, I can't quit this profession. I love it too much. So I decided that I am going to, boy, time is moving on. So time is moving on. So I decided that I'm going to open my own funeral home, and I opened up a low-cost storefront funeral home in Saskatoon in 2002, November. Since that time, I have worked there, which has been 17, 18 years, and then I sold the company to the company that fired me. So they were very keen of getting their market share back. So I just retired because I decided that there's more to life than whenever a death happens. I dropped everything and decided that there's more to life than dealing with death and grieving family. So I want to find out who I am after the funeral business is all over, said and done. So I'm in February, it'll be my 42nd year in the profession. And I decided that that's it. So if you're a young student and you want to get into this profession, what can a funeral home pay for you right now? Well, minimum wage is right under $12 an hour. They might start you at 12, but you have to prove yourself. You have to show them what you're made of. If you're going to stand around with your hands in your pockets, the funeral home director will shake their heads. No standing with hands on your pockets or on your hips, and put your cell phone away and show them that you want to work. And work means not complaining. When they say something to you, you go and do it. And when you're done, to the best of your ability, you come back and you say, I'm all done. Is there anything else for me to do? And so people like ambitious people. Now, if you're making $12 an hour, I'll guarantee you'll get 15. Now you're saying, well, 15 is not very much. But I'm saying to you is that the harder and the more consistent you work, and you take direction without complaining, and you're not on your cell phone, you will rise to the top. And if you become a student and you excel well, you do well in school, you do well on the job, probably when you get hired on, you're going to be at $20 an hour. And every time you get more schooling, you're going to get more money. It's all going to depend. Like if you're a funeral home director and you've been there 5 years, an embalmer, you could make 60 grand a year, maybe more. It all depends. Nowadays, sky's the limit because we're such a shortage. But really, truly, if you have a passion for looking and you want a career that's secure, you're not afraid of working, you like old people, you like visiting with people, you're just a nice, congenial young person who wants to make a difference, this profession is yours. So it's 11:11, and I think I'll close with that, and I'll answer a few questions. I think I've covered a few things, but maybe we'll open it up to some questions here.
Thank you so much, John. That was very well done, and some very good information for students to ponder, to see if this is actually their calling for a career. We do have some questions. I think we'll start with Doug.
John, I have three actually, but you mentioned the schools. One was Mount Royal in Calgary. Where was the other one?
Oh, I'm sorry. That one was in, it's out of Winnipeg or out of Alberta, Manitoba, pardon me.
Okay. The next question, for the transportation of the deceased, is there any training involved in that particular one?
No, there is no training in that. So you would be hired on by a transfer service, or you come to a funeral home. We'll teach you how to remove a deceased individual from, whether it's a nursing home or from the hospital or from a couch or a bed or on the floor, wherever they have expired.
Okay. And wages, current wages, director, embalmer, transportation individual, rough estimates, where would they be?
Well, as I said prior to, if you're 5 years experience as a funeral director embalmer and you're top of the class, you're 60, 70,000 a year annual salary. So if you're into management, you could be a lot higher than that. Some funeral home managers are making 120, 130,000. So, but they have responsibilities and responsibilities. These are probably 300 to 400 calls a year of funeral homes. So that's where you need a manager that is able to deal with staff and deal with the volume of the calls coming in your door.
How about for the transport? What kind of wage would they make?
They would probably get 12 to they would get, maybe $15 an hour. It'd be very minimal.
Going back to the education part, I know back in the day, I think a student had to be apprenticed or would have to have that job in order to take the online course. Do you have to come through a funeral home in order to take the Mount Royal or the Winnipeg course? Or can a student just choose to do that course and then look for that employment afterwards?
I'm not sure how it works nowadays. I do believe that if you don't have a funeral home, they'll still register you, but they're going to have you go around, and that'll be one of your first priorities, is find a funeral home that you can go work at. It's huge, because they know that if you're working in a funeral home, you're going to be a way better student online because you have that experience. So they know, as proctoring or any type of education online, they know you're working at a funeral home. So most of the staff, or most of the students, know what they're talking about, the terminology in the funeral home.
Okay, so it is possible to get into the program without a funeral home backing, but ideally they'll need to find that employment.
Correct.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm not sure if there's any other questions that we have for you. Nope, it looks like we're good.
Okay, thank you very much again, John, for this informative presentation. Really appreciate it. I'm sure the kids will find this very useful. So thank you again.
You're very welcome, and thank you for asking me. And I'm talking just about the profession, and it's just not me, it's the whole profession. Any managers or owners out there, we need staff. We need young people to come up and give us old timers, us gray-haired old little guys and girls, help in the funeral home profession. So we need you. So and we'll look after you. That's one thing that we do, is we bring you into our group, our family, our funeral home, because we're one little family, and we'll look after you. If you do your part, we'll do our part, and that's looking after you. So that's the way our funeral homes work.
Awesome. Thanks so much for those final words, John. That was awesome. Thank you.
Okay.